Lucy woke up after an absolutely great night's sleep. She felt really rested. As she opened her eyes, she noticed that the breeze was blowing in through the curtain and it was bellowing out into the bedroom. She could hear birds singing, but it was obviously very early morning. All of a sudden she heard the sound of what seemed like a small van chugging its way up the road towards the cottage, and she heard the chink of bottles. When she went downstairs half an hour later, after having her ablutions, she opened the door, and there on the doorstep stood some bread and 2 pints of milk. Blue top, the creamy kind. There was a small note stuck between the bottles, and she picked it up and read it. Morning, left in the hope you'd need it. No charge this time. A moving treat. All the best for the future in your new home, Todd. Obviously the milk person. She didn't even know they had the milk delivered out here, but obviously they did. On the other side, it gave his full phone number and said, if you wish to carry on getting your milk or any other bits and pieces, bread, cream, etc., just bell me and let me know. Later on in the morning, after emptying the washing machine and going outside to put the washing on the line, there was still a slight breeze, but the sun was shining and the backyard was pleasantly warm. She noticed several families in the fields over the hedge at the end of the garden. They were walking across the fields. There was a mum and a dad and 2 small children. As it was the weekend, they were out walking. There was a small dog who Phyllis the cat noted from the fence and let out a yell of indignation, not happy that the dog was so close to his hedge. Lucy spent most of the day in the backyard. She noticed a couple of more interesting facts that she hadn't noticed before about her garden. For a start, there was a water pump, old and slightly rusted, obviously no longer in use. But she'd like to clean it up and paint it and leave it there, as it looked really nice. Also, it was part of the history of the cottage, and she stopped and looked at it and tried to imagine the people that would use the pump over the years before the water was hooked up to the house. Over the other side of the garden was the outside kazi, the toilet. It was built of brick and looked pretty solid. On the top it had corrugated iron, which had rusted in places but still looked pretty strong. She slowly opened the door. There was a metal latch. She opened the door and it squeaked open. Inside there was a whole load of gardening tools, everything one could need for the garden. Well, I guess Mrs. P didn't need to take it to the old people's home, she thought to herself. But how wonderful of her to leave it behind, because after sharing a flat with the other girls, I had nothing to do with gardening. She knew that her mum and her father had a few bits and pieces, but she could hardly ask them to bring it over just so she could do her own backyard. She decided that she would continue with getting on with tidying up the place. She got out a big bass broom and started to sweep down the yard where there were some flagstones which were set in a corner where her dustbin would live, and it looked like it had always lived. She knew that she would have to carry it out every Tuesday, she thought it was, and pop it outside the front gate, when the refuge people would come and take it. She must remember to do that before she went off to work, she thought, as obviously she had to be out and gone early in the morning to be in the office at school before the children started to enter. She carried on, pulling out a few weeds between the flagstones and singing and happily just watching the few people that seemed to walk past the hedge at the back of her house. One young person came over and smiled at her and asked her if she was the new lady that was going to work in his school office. I am, she said. Hello, he said. I'm Michael. I'm 6. She smiled and wondered what it was with the fascination of young children telling you their name and their age, as if it was all so important, the most important thing they needed to tell you. It didn't matter to tell you where they lived, as long as you knew their name and their age. That was all they really wanted you to know. She watched as the little boy waved and ran back to his mum, who was also walking a small toy poodle. The cat didn't seem to mind this one, or hadn't noticed. The cat had now curled up under a bush over in the corner. It just laid there with its tail wrapped round its body, and the tip of its tail was touching its nose. Its eyes were closed. She couldn't hear if it was snoring or not, but he looked contented and happy and quite warm there, so she just thought she'd leave him. A little bit later on, there was other people walking across the field, and they waved, and one of the gentlemen come over and introduced himself as Mr. Howard. "We just live down the lane," he said. "We've got a small cottage, my wife, myself, and the 2 children. We're just going for a walk now over into woods. We're going pond dipping. The children love it. It's a great thing to do. Just a small pond over there, but it's right over the back, through the wood and in the middle of the next field. It's a lovely place to be with the kids on a Sunday afternoon. Fancy a walk?" "Not now," she said. "I'm absolutely filthy. I've been doing the backyard." "So will I be seeing your children at the school when I start work on Monday?" "Oh yes," he said. "Both of them are there. Not very old, as you can see. But they'll be there. You'll see them." Off he went, and she waved to his wife and the 2 children. The children looked, smiled, and the mum waved back quite heartily. "Crumbs," thought Lucy, "everybody seems so nice. They don't even know me, and they're all talking to me as if I've been here forever. Maybe it's the cottage. Maybe it's full of happiness, and maybe that's why everybody wants to talk to me all the time." Anyway, she carried on, and she looked round and noticed the cat had gone. He had moved, probably off on some adventure, chasing some mouse or something, knowing the cat as she did. She sat there quite happily for a moment, just thinking what of the next chore she should do. She knew really she should go indoors and maybe grab some lunch. Breakfast hadn't happened. She had been far too interested in getting on with this garden. The next plan would be, the following day, to empty the shed out and look and see exactly what she did own and what she didn't. There was the normal thing, a rake, a hoe, a spade, a shovel, all the things that one would need, but she hadn't seen any hedge trimmers. Maybe they had fallen down the back of the pile, and she would check it, but she'd check tomorrow. By now it was easily lunchtime, so indoors she went. She made herself a sandwich, found herself some biscuits, and sat down with a huge mug of tea. As she sat down, she began to think of the things she would need to do for tomorrow. For tomorrow was Monday, and Monday was the first day of her new job. She wasn't anxious as much as excited, but as you know, going to a new job can be quite anxious for anybody. It's not just going to the new job, is it? It's meeting people, remembering the important names, remembering the important places, and she'd only walked round the school once and it had been empty, so there definitely wasn't the worry of meeting any of the children. After she'd had her lunch, she started to do a few more tidying up jobs. She went out into the front garden, swept up a load of leaves, walked along the border, pulling out any weeds that seemed to have pushed their little head up towards the sun, and made her way to the gate. She leant over the gate and felt quite happy at the thought of just standing there and watching the little lane and watching the lane's world go by. There was plenty of animals, birds, all sorts. She could hear them moving in the grass, and she was quite happy that the countryside seemed to like her as much as she liked it. The letterbox on the side of the wall by her door was one of the things she really must sort out. It had obviously once been a deep burgundy colour, but now it sided down almost to a pale pink. How strange, he thought. Nobody leave it like that. But anyway, that would be her next chore. And that's what she thought about. What colour shall I have it? As she went in through her front door. She shut the door behind her, knowing that the end of the day would be good. And she continued on. "So, tomorrow morning I'm off to work," she said. "Fine. What do I need?"